Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beard Blather 199, just one short of the bicentennial. Bad things happen in wars. Well, I would say it's kind of depressing we have to say this, but we'll get to it in a second. This is Solvent Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from my golden cage in Southeast Florida. And with me, right over there, Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War I flamethrowers and so much more. From Californication, because everybody in California is being fornicated. And before we start, just the usual spiel. We're going live on our channel in Odyssey, YouTube, but not for long, and 3 timelines in Twitter, so that you all get an overdose. And that would be Podverum's own timeline, my timeline, and Thomas's timeline, which some, how shall I say, persistent morons insist I have hijacked. That would come as news to Thomas, as it came as news to me. And of course, the biggest proof that I haven't is that the assholes are not blocked in there, because if it was up to me, they would be.
Yeah, I mean, hi. Just to explain my appearance, I'm just now recovering from a terrible migraine that I've had for several hours. So I'm in the light sensitive, exhausted, quivery, post nausea phase. I don't get migraines very often, but when I do, they're bad. And so I'm good to go for tonight. That's not going to be a problem. But I have to. I've spent several hours in a dark room, just lying on the bed, going, oh, God.
You mean I won't be able to interrogate you with a strobe light?
No.
How am I gonna give you a brainwash?
That's so. The people who believe that are the people who believe in the widespread universal use of MK Ultra and all of that. I mean, so it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to say that I'm under. It's all about. I mean, just to reiterate, MK Ultra didn't work. That was what they discovered, and I had a terrible phone call several years ago from a former high school friend who was steadily deteriorating mentally. And one day she called me and she said that she had something to ask me and that it was very sensitive and she didn't know how I'd react. And she started very hesitantly going into what sounded to me, she was having dreams, and her dreams were absolutely characteristic of somebody who's, since we're on YouTube, somebody who's been preyed upon when they were a child. And I don't mean by
an abused child, that you don't mean just hitting in the buttocks.
So when somebody starts to talk to you about that, you have to be very careful, especially if they can't figure out what's happening. You could do a lot of damage by going, guess what? You were. And then what happened was, she said, after describing all her dreams or recurrent dreams, they were dreams of being in a room having operations performed on her without anesthesia, with large adults leaning over her. And this is a very typical way of somebody dreaming about this, because it's all about, penetration and pain and all of that. Without you, it's not a memory, it's a way for you to attempt to process what was done to you when you were a small child. So, I was fully prepared to very gently listen and ask her what she thought it meant. And then all of a sudden, after describing all this, she said, have you heard of MK Ultra? And I went,
Oh God.
and I said, yes. And she started talking about what she claimed was the American government's adoption of Joseph Mengele's trauma disassociation brainwashing, where they cause you an incredible amount of pain and you disassociate, and when you're in that dissociative state, they give you suggestions, so when you come back, it's exactly like the premise in the Manchurian Candidate.
It sounds a little bit like Clockwork Orange.
Well, it doesn't work. I mean, that's not what a dissociative state is. They've recently concluded that multiple personalities don't exist.
Right.
The major ones that we all know about, like Sybil and the Three Faces of Eve, both those psychiatrists lied.
Yep.
And there's never been an actual recorded case of multiple personalities. It was something popularized by Hollywood.
Yep.
And when you enter a dissociative state, you can't be brainwashed into becoming someone else, because you don't enter a dissociative state for days or years or whatever.
No. No.
You dissociate.
You do under painful circumstances, under torture, for instance. You may kind of you feel like you're looking at this from someplace else.
Right. And you're still seeing what's happening. You know exactly.
You see what is happening to you. It is as if you were floating above the room or standing on the side, but you convince yourself that it's happening to somebody else, that you're watching it happen, that it's not happening to you, and then more often than not you pass out.
Yeah.
But I doubt very much that anybody can plant any ideas at that stage. I don't think it's possible, feasible, and you are confirming to me that indeed there is no record of it working. I know that all of the brainwashing experiments that were done at a time when they thought the Russians were advanced in it. Of course, the Russians weren't, because the Russians are never advanced on anything. And it was total failure here. It does work, however, if you want to sell a book.
Yeah. And you can brainwash, okay, the Russians today are considered brainwashed, but it's by choice. Not even North Koreans at the height of Kim Jong-un, despite the lurid stories about him, he's not as, I mean, we don't even know what the reality is, but almost every single person who is fed to dogs or killed by flamethrowers has later appeared alive in public. So,
yeah.
But his father was definitely a monster.
He was a beaut. And his grandfather was even worse.
Exactly. And even during the Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il phases, there were defectors, people who didn't know anything about the outside world, but they figured it couldn't be as bad as North Korea. So the idea of brainwashing someone into being this, you could brainwash people in the sense that you convince them that something is right, but then they keep up the brainwashing themselves.
Yeah, the closest thing that I could have come to brainwashing was when in my youth I embraced the ideals of socialism. That was going to bring me freedom, and it is a self-induced. Uh, uh, I don't know how to put it. Trans-like thing.
Yeah,
You believe your bullshit. You automatically discard anything that contradicts it. But nobody's putting those ideas in your mind. You're doing it yourself. You want them to be true, therefore they are.
exactly.
Until
Yeah.
you know you go to Cuba, you see what a hospital looks like. You realize that everything you thought about it is a fucking lie, and you start questioning everything.
Well, my New York brother belonged to a political cult. It was called the New Alliance Party, and it was started by a psychiatrist. No, he's a psychologist named Fred Newman. And Fred Newman was one of the most physically homely males who ever lived. And he figured out a way to have sex with as many young college students as he could. And when my brother went to Occidental, where he got introduced to all this, they gave him, or he took, it was his choice. He took tons of LSD, and they use these struggle sessions where, okay, they bring you into all cults work exactly the same way. Cults that recruit adults. If it's males, you recruit them with beautiful young seductive women.
Oh yeah,
Um, you inculate
that's
them,
what the Bhagwan did. Remember him?
exactly. You give them, you inculate them with these ideas, and then at some point you have you reject them, and after they've been plied, I mean, they pick certain people. They wouldn't pick me because they would know right off the bat, that we can't we can't use this guy. They use people. They target people whose minds can be warped. As my Vegas brother says about our youngest brother, he took out his brain and he threw it away. And
Yeah.
he did this on his own. And what they do is they reject you at some point, and then you are so horrified that you've lost all this that you go crawling back, and they tear you down. It's called a struggle session. They tear you down to the ground, and they rebuild you just like the Marines claim they do. They tear you down in boot camp,
Well,
and
that's what basic training is.
exactly.
You have to destroy the civilian and build the soldier.
But Marines are still the people they were before, only
Oh
now
yeah,
Marines.
yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah. No, it's not a brainwashing they do.
no, it's not brainwashed.
It's a change of habits, which
But
21 days is enough for that.
exactly. And as you said, people believe things because I never discuss politics. I was in Japan when, at the height of my brother's attempt to recruit everyone in the family. And so I never discussed politics with him. By the time I came back, he was pretending that, he was out of the cult, and that, I mean, he was basically, I mean, the New Alliance Party had all sorts of scandals, and Fred Newman, was sued and convicted of, I don't know if he's convicted, but, he was accused of this, that, and the other. So in March of 2020, my brother called me, and he was screaming like Hitler, and he'd adopted when he joined the New Alliance Party, he'd adopted this very gentle, patient voice, this demeanor where he would explain things. So I never heard him scream like this, and it was crazy. And he was going off on Trump. And I've told this before. I asked him if he was near his computer, and we sat down on opposite coasts on our computers,
Mm-hmm.
and I debunked with facts every single talking point he had. And there'd be these long silences as he was rebooting, and then he just went back to the first one all over again. Yep. So I did it just to test him. He has nothing. He has no. His political viewpoint is that of a child, and all he could do is scream and insult and belittle, and he's got no. It's the worst form of political leftism, where he's an emotional leftist. And
God, is there any other kind?
True. Well, God only knows why anyone would. I mean, leftism has nothing to recommend it at this point, as we've seen in this country. And now that the establishment Republicans are an endangered species who are not going to recover at any time soon. So all this is to say that and on top of it all, you and I disagree fundamentally on tons of things. So if I were brainwashed, wouldn't I be agreeing on everything?
Well, no, because I'm such a wizard. I'm such a Machiavellian controller that I have programmed you to disagree with me on certain points, so as to convince people that indeed I'm not controlling you. But let me see. Let me see if I can do this. Just concentrate on my finger, Thomas. Concentrate on my finger. Now you're going to cluck like a chicken.
Arf, 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 arf.
Fuck. I got my animals confused again. I have to start the training all over. I suppose if I ask you to bark, you're going to move now.
I've never been hypnotized. I'm one of those people who can't be hypnotized because I'm too skeptical. It's just not. I mean, it's deeply silly, and people making these accusations, like you said, they've got an answer to everything. Oh, well, he programmed you to disagree with him. Oh, okay. Well, then I guess you're right about everything. We don't disagree on the air because there's no point. We're trying to discuss a topic without really inserting. We're presenting a unified front, but that doesn't mean we don't have major disagreements behind the scene. But we're not going to be Cenk Uyghur
and we always let's tell people how this works. Number one, we're not trying to emulate MSLSD with a shit throwing feast. So that no, you're wrong, because that leads nowhere. It's the what was this idiot from Ohio? Former mayor of Cincinnati, who had a TV show with the lumpen proletariat throwing poo at each other. I'll remember it later. We don't want to do that. And when we disagree, we explore the idea. Often I have come back to you and says, damn it, you were right. The other way around. But once we speak our mind, what is the point on, like going to the bottom of the Grand Canyon? I don't want to convince you. You don't want to convince me. We exchange ideas.
Well, that's the thing.
And we understand that either one of us can be wrong at any time. And often we are. And who gives a shit?
Well, also, okay, I mean, we were both talking about Cenk Uyghur versus Douglas Murray on the Morgan show. And, it was no contest. And in the end, despite my respect and admiration for Douglas Murray, it was a waste of time because Cenk Uyghur is a buffoon. He's not going to say
Well,
anything ever. He has no insights into anything. He didn't even know who Douglas Murray is.
no.
And if it were me, I would have said to Chink, the title of our show, Bad Things Happen in Wars. And the Israelis and the Ukrainians have to make tough decisions on a daily basis. And the Ukrainians are fighting a conventional army. One could argue that it's a terrorist army, given its unending bombardment.
It's penchant for targeting civilians.
Exactly. But the Israelis are fighting an enemy who deliberately built a massive underground fortress and put 2.1 million civilians on top of them to serve as human shields. So,
Yep.
Of course, there are going to be civilian deaths. It's nowhere near 20,000. Yesterday and today, the Israelis finished an operation in what's called the upscale, the elite area of Gaza.
Yep.
And they blew up the entire tunnel system. There's an incredible video of just block after block going.
Which, by the way, now that you mention it, there is an asshole in Twitter, a journalist, mind you, who was speculating whether that was a tactical nuclear weapon, and I almost choked laughing.
Oh, it was Hamas's weapons depots,
Yes.
and
But there was
whatever.
nothing nuclear. It was the string of explosions in the tunnel.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, at the end of that operation, 1,000 dead Hamas, and today they killed 800. So these are the casualties that are happening. I'm not worried in the slightest. And Cenk Uygur was gibbering about babies. Don't you care about babies? And it's like, it's not a question of caring about babies. It's a question about it's a war. It's an official.
But it's the same fallacy. They use the same fallacy. Do you think, Thomas, really my heart bleeds that in a country as rich as America is, babies are going to bed hungry tonight? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck? It's not a question of fairness. It's not a question that one side loves babies and the other one doesn't. That sophistry of this at its simplest and more pathetic. The question is, do you want the babies in Gaza to grow up to be productive adults and live happy lives with a good standard of living by the beach? If you want that, you need to destroy Hamas. If in that process a few babies die, you cannot cut a cheese without cutting through holes.
Well,
period.
You hear them say, how many babies have to die before you're satisfied? This is a deeply dishonest question because babies aren't being targeted, and there's not.
And it has nothing to do with anyone's satisfaction.
Exactly. The goal is to destroy Hamas, and this is okay. William Tecumseh Sherman said, "War is the remedy our enemies have chosen. Our enemy has chosen, and I say we give him all that he can stand." And
and we've said it in different words. When will the war end? When the enemy surrenders? When the last of the enemy is killed or lays down their weapons and surrenders?
Well, the thing about Hamas is that their admiration was way out of proportion to their actual intelligence, their military intelligence, because it turns out that Hamas is an entirely centralized organization, and
Like all of these collectivist assets are,
exactly,
like the
and
North Koreans, like the Russians.
yeah, and you and I have discussed the chain of command in Western armed forces, where theoretically a private could take over a unit
Yep.
if all the officers were dead, and that private has been briefed beforehand what the mission is. In the case of Hamas, when they kill the commanders, there's nobody there to tell
Nobody knows what's going on.
these goobers, what to do, and so they die and they surrender, um,
In droves.
in droves.
And then they surrender with their weapons up. And
It,
and and then the keyboard jihadists erase the weapons so that they look like civilians. I love, by the way, the director of the hospital in Khan Yunis, who
yeah, yeah,
surrendered with his weapons, and he was the director of the hospital. No wonder they had a tunnel entrance in his hospital.
of course. I mean, the entire Gaza Strip is rotten with Hamas, and now that we've seen the extent of the tunneling, we know the absolute. Prior to this conflict, this war, you heard that they would send little kids in to dig these tunnels, and then the kids would die in the cave-ins and all of that, or this, that, and the other. Little kids didn't build anything that I've seen, and okay, they're the biggest and deepest tunnels. I saw a video
They're
of
like the London Underground.
what's that?
They're like the London Underground.
Yeah, I
You
saw.
have tunnels 40, 50 yards deep
Well, also
and 3 miles long.
they're also paved, because I saw a video of
Yes.
Mohammed Sinwar, who is Yahya Sinwar's brother, the overall military commander of Hamas. Mohammed Sinwar was in charge of tunnel construction, and there's a video of him driving a car through one of
Yes.
those tunnels.
I saw that one. Interesting.
Yeah, it could be a tunnel in Switzerland. I mean, going through the mountains.
Yes.
So, and they're saying this must have cost millions. No, billions.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's our taxpayers at work, man. Because all the money that we've given these assholes, half went into their bank accounts and the other half into tunnels. And the
Yeah.
people of Gaza, fuck them.
Yeah.
As long as they are good shields, nobody gives a shit about it.
well, exactly.
Not even the people of Gaza, by the way, because the one thing that the media is not discussing is how the people of Gaza are very happy to be shields.
Yeah.
They are sold into the cause. Hamas are heroes, and we got to kill the Jews. I don't believe there are innocent civilians in Gaza. As the hostages that were liberated, their debriefings have some become public, some not. But a picture is beginning to emerge. As the Hamas asshats were on their killing and raping spree, Hamas civilians were trotting alongside them and committing their own depredations. And there are the cases of hostages that are still in Gaza that Hamas does not and never did have. They were kidnapped by groups of civilians that took advantage of the breach and went after their own booty. In more than one sense.
Hostage.
What do you do with those civilians?
Well, I mean, they're war criminals. They're terrorists, and they get to die.
Yeah.
There were hostages who escaped, and they were recaptured by civilians and turned back over to Hamas.
Yeah.
So,
that's precisely what I'm talking about. Yes.
You can't tell me that, okay, when they drove through the crowd with the body, the naked body of a German Israeli girl who already
Yes.
murdered, and everyone is screaming and raving with happiness. You can't tell me that's
And
all in.
spitting on her corpse.
Yeah. No. Or, when they hand out candy after they've murdered somebody.
Yes.
Um, so,
why am I expected to have any kind of sympathy for these monsters?
they sowed the wind and now they're reaping the whirlwind. Yeah. And they're very sad, but this has to happen. They push the Israelis too far. And okay, I read a quote today by some Democratic congressman or senator saying that Biden's gone too easy on Israel. No, that's not it at all. It's that Israel consistently tells him to shove it up his butt.
Yep.
And what do you do in that case?
Well, if you're Biden, you shove it up your butt and even like it.
You don't dare cut off aid to Israel because Jewish Democratic voters are already having second thoughts.
And there are a lot of evangelicals who are also having second thoughts. Remember that the most staunch pro-Israel lobby in the U.S. is not the Jewish lobby. Jews are 2% of the votes in this country.
No.
Evangelicals are a much larger share, and they are staunchly pro-Israel.
No, and when you see Ivy League universities standing by their useless,
their plagiarist diversity hires.
Yeah, more donors are getting on the I'm out of here.
Oh, she's going to resign.
Yeah,
mind my work, she is going to resign.
No, and
maybe tomorrow, maybe a month from now, when things cool down, and they can claim that, oh well, this has nothing to do with that. It's just a new stage in my life. But they're going to push her out the door or out a window, whichever comes first.
Yeah. No, and we stand with the Palestinians. Well, how come you never stood with the Syrians who are getting murdered by terrorists? How come you never stood with the Libyans who are getting murdered by terrorists? It's like,
remember when you and I were talking about the Uyghurs in 2017, and nobody else was?
Yeah.
And nobody else was.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are a few, not many. But back in 2017, whenever you or I spoke of the Uyghurs, we had to explain who they were. There are 1 million fucking Muslims in concentration camps. They use them to farm their organs for the black market. And you don't hear any of these bleeding heart assholes complain one bit. There are 7 million refugees in the Sudan. There are 23 million refugees in sub-Saharan Africa. 23 million.
Yeah.
Living in squalor, living in camps without food, without water, without hygiene. 1.7 million Afghans are being deported from Pakistan as we speak.
Yep.
Does anybody give a shit?
No. When we went into Afghanistan, the loudest proponent for Afghan women was Jay Leno's wife, Mavis. She shut her mouth because it was Bush doing it, so she couldn't possibly support that.
Bush. Imagine that.
And
that's you and I know how much the Kurds have taken. As we speak, Turkey is bombing the living fuck out of the Syrian Kurdistan.
Yeah.
Did you hear any complaints?
No, in the UN doesn't give a damn. The UN Human Rights Council exists only to pass resolution condemnations of Israel. And
yes,
when you look at the number of autocratic bloodthirsty nations, leaderships that are on this thing, starting with Iran. It's ridiculous, and this is what is Israel is doing now is something that it has to do, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. But for a month and a half now, since the first time we said that they can't stop and they need to go to the source. The source, of course, being Iran. And they need to go, they have to obliterate Hamas, but we need to work out a plan to eliminate all of the Iran proxies and the mullahs to boot. Now, when we were talking this, we were giving the examples and talking about places in the world most people never heard of, like Bab el Mandeb and Hormuz. Well, guess fucking what? Bab el Mandeb is now, to all effects and purposes, closed.
Mm-hmm.
The big freight companies have decided to fuck it. We're going around the Cape of Good Hope. And of course, that means an extra 10 days to 15 days of time to get to Rotterdam. It means higher prices for everything Europe imports. 70% of Europe's imports used to go through Bab el Mandeb. That is going to mean inflation. Yay! Because, prices will go up. And we've let a band of goat fucking Stone Age asshats close the most important sea route in the world.
Well,
and just when you're bitching about it, Iran sends a drone and hits a ship controlled by an Israeli company near the shores of India who was coming out of Hormuz. So let me see if I get this right. Iran is attacking international trade in international waters. They're effectively closing or selecting who goes through Hormuz and Bab el Mandeb, and we're sitting on the largest navy in the world, jacking off.
Yeah. No, and everybody else, there are some very capable navies out there. They don't want to join in. It's like, okay, so
but say it, Thomas, because Spain I don't count because Spain is governed by Iran by proxy. France, Italy, they don't want to join a naval task force directed by America. They have no problem with one directed by NATO. They don't want to put their ships under the command of fucking Biden, and I cannot blame them.
No, I mean that's what this is all about. And okay, Egypt, the Suez Canal is basically going to be without business. So there is a massive percentage of Egypt's economy.
Oh yeah.
So and there's a solution there. The Saudis ended their incursion into
Yemen.
Excuse me, with a peace deal or a ceasefire deal. But the Saudis don't have strategic bombers. We have strategic bombers, and we have an obligation. Yeah, we have an obligation to go in and destroy the Houthi missile and drone firing positions, and that's all there is to it.
And the Iran Revolutionary Guard bases.
Yeah. No,
where did that drone flew from? Destroy that airport. Destroy that base. We don't have to send troops to fight.
No.
For a square inch of sand.
No.
We can do this with strategic bombers. Maybe special operators to paint the targets, and that's about it.
Well, okay. the we don't have an interest there, or endless war crowd. Let's see if they're singing a different tune when the Houthis have shut down the entire Red Sea shipping area, which they essentially have.
They essentially have.
Yeah,
and essentially have. They've made it too dangerous for merchant ships to risk it.
No, Iran did this in 1988, and so we basically sank their navy. And
yeah,
the Houthis don't have a navy, but they've got a few helicopters, and they've got some shitty missiles, and they've got drones. Well, we all we do is we create a demilitarized zone, and anyone who goes into this part of Yemen, gets vaporized. We put combat air patrols over
what used to be South Yemen.
Yeah, and if the Houthis don't like it, then too bad. They're the ones you don't allow. I mean, the Houthis aren't even. I mean, they're a terrorist group. They're not even a legitimate government. The world recognizes the Yemeni government, but it doesn't recognize the Houthis as a legitimate government. So, what's the problem? And the problem is that Biden and his people, they're the one thing they don't want more than anything is they don't want to be held responsible for anything. That's a hallmark of leftism, and Biden's worried about American casualties. He's worried about civilian casualties. He's worried about anything that somebody can, point the finger at him and say, you did a bad thing. And, so as long as Biden's in charge, nothing will be done. Okay, the Israeli...
And I'll underscore this. And as long as Biden is in charge, our allies will not join us as long as Biden and the diversity hire in the Department of Defense are in charge. Yeah. Nobody has any confidence in these two morons, for good reason. Nobody wants to go through Afghanistan again.
No.
Because our allies got fucked in the ear with our withdrawal. These imbeciles didn't have the courtesy of telling warning our allies that we're going to pull the plug. We pulled the plug, and they were caught in the means in the mincemeter. Meat mincer. It's grotesque in its execution. But neither the Brits nor the Italians nor the Dutch have forgiven Biden for leaving them holding the bag.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be in that position again. So as long as Operation Blow My Ear, it's led by, oh my God, Biden and Austin, you can count everybody else out.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. Well, our troops are so dedicated, they're not going to question command, but they will go there trembling.
Yeah, and this is what happens, okay, when you elect an incompetent who also happens to have dementia. And, because he's going to be decent, and Trump sent mean tweets, so he was indecent. I heard, okay, they're starting up with Trump is unfit for office.
Yes, yet again.
Yeah, none of this is working. The Hitler thing didn't work. The white supremacists didn't work. The cycles are going faster and faster, and now the press.
The insurrection is going to implode.
Well, they're all, because, I mean, Jack Murphy or Jack Smith has nothing. He has nothing, and he's crazy. He's a fanatic. All of these people, they're malevolent. All the people. Somebody on Twitter put together all these leftists, from politicians to, talking heads, basically laying out what Biden is doing by using the Justice Department, so-called, to persecute political enemies. Only they were talking about Trump. All these clips were from 2019 and 2020, and they were prescient, but they were accusing Trump of things that he didn't do and would never do, and everything they're describing is exactly what Biden is doing.
But by the way, we have joined Russia now in a select group. Putin is just banned a woman from being a candidate for the presidency of Russia in opposition to him. So we have Putin and Biden both doing what they can to exclude people who might challenge their rule.
Yeah.
And they're using the exact same technique.
Of course.
I suppose that, since Putin has to take care of the investment they made in Hunter, they're advising Biden as to how to do this.
Of course. I mean, Biden, the Russians and the Chinese own Biden. And, the Chinese, I mean, okay, Russia is an absolute dictatorship. China is an absolute dictatorship. Obama came as close to being a dictator running the country.
As he could.
Remember when they used to say that Huey Long in Louisiana was the closest we ever came to
the kingfish?
The kingfish, yeah. And Huey Long was a piker compared to Obama and Biden.
God, a Boy Scout compared to those two.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, let's face it, a Democrat, therefore he was corrupt, authoritarian. It comes with the territory. But it's folkloric. It's almost like a cartoon of these two.
Yeah. No.
What Obama did, and I've been pre-announcing my next thread in Quod Verum. It's going to be in Quod Verum, not in Twitter, because I promised, and I will fulfill. I'm not writing threads in Twitter, Packham. But remember the Dismal 8? Now I'm working on the Catastrophic 4. Biden is being exponentially worse than Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he wouldn't have existed without Obama softening the ground. I mean, let's give the guy some credit. But the way in which Biden has corrupted justice, law enforcement, border. This past week, Border Patrol got 27 terrorists trying to enter the country. We know that about half of those entering the country do so without ever being detected.
Mm-hmm.
So if they caught 27, how many got in?
Also, they're closing border control stations at the order of the guy leading the entity leading the border and boredom enforcement, border and customs
Border
enforcement.
Patrol. Yeah.
The border patrol, yeah. So, and what's funny is they get these weirdos that are doing more damage than good to Biden to come out and say none of this is happening. Everything's fine. The border is secure.
The border is closed.
Yeah.
The border is closed and secured, according to Mayorkas. I call him Menorcas. There's nothing major about him. That fucking lying critic has the gall to stand in front of a camera and say the border is closed? Are they that delusional? Do they really think that the majority of the American people will buy into that shit?
Leftists believe that words are much worse than actions, and they also believe that simply saying something makes it so. And so,
Yeah, some kind of idealism, yes.
when they say the border is closed, I mean, they believe that all they have to do, because this has been proven time and again, all they have to do is say something, and then everyone will go, "Oh, great, we believe you." And it's this is why I once had a conversation with the sister of this guy, this famous guy I knew, and some British socialist had just died, and he left an estate of, I don't know, 2 billion with a B pounds, and his home took up basically an entire city block in London. And I just said something how could this guy call himself a socialist when he's a multiple billionaire? And she went off on me as if I insulted her heritage. And she said, "Why can't he have nice things?" And I said, "Nobody's saying he can't have nice things, but you could have a very nice home that isn't the size of a city block. And since you're always talking about confiscatory taxes, how about if this guy had to lose a billion and a third, and he was left with a measly 750 million pounds? How would his life change?" And she just defended him and defended him and defended him. And it's because he just said all the right things, and so that made it,
and donated to the right causes.
Exactly. And it was so obviously brainless. I mean, I hadn't intended on getting into a debate with her, and she just flew off the handle and lost her mind. So that told me that she knew on a certain level that I'm right. Nobody who's worth 2 billion plus pounds has any right to call himself a socialist.
Well, but they all are.
They all are, yeah.
I mean, all. Oh God, how many years have we discussed this? All of the socialist leaders, all of the communist leaders, all of the revolutionaries come from the upper classes.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Not one of them had to work a day in his life.
Yeah.
Even Marx didn't work a fucking day in his entire life, and he's much of Engels, who had more money than the Queen.
Sure.
By the way, that was hyperbole. I don't mean exactly that he had a larger fortune than the Queen, but he had a huge fortune. And all of them. How about Halber Rhodes, the billionaire nobody talks about, who's done more damage to Europe and the US than the rest of them combined? And when interviewed by the Communist Party newspaper in France, they actually said to him, how come you're a billionaire and you keep adding to your fortune? And he said, every dime I make goes for the revolution. And in his case, it does.
Sure.
And he's way worse than Soros. Way worse than Soros. And he's essentially he caused Spain to crumble into being dominated by Iran and Venezuela. Can you imagine that?
No.
The European country essentially controlled by Maduro and
the mullahs.
Khamenei. I mean, it's insane. But that's what it is.
And none of these people, of course, are actual socialists. They just want power, and the best way to have power
they are socialists. They want the state to control every aspect of your life, and they can control the state.
Exactly. So they're not personal socialists. They are socialists in the sense that they see it as the ultimate sort of power enforcement tool, but they're not going to sacrifice a penny in their own lives, because
they're not going to share their fortune for worker solidarity. That's for the birds.
No, some pigs are more equal than others, and
yes. The island of Dr. Moreau. What a beautiful reference. I want to underscore it, lest it fly over the heads of some. Some pigs are more equal than others.
Yeah. No, and I don't know. It's I mean, you get to a point where we're not at a crisis point in the sense that we can recover from a lot of stuff fairly quickly, but why does it have to get to this point before people react? I mean, like the videos of like the just the streams of people, mostly military aged men, coming in across the border. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And
how about a massive demonstration down Fifth Avenue, fucking up Christmas shoppers?
Yeah.
And the same, and by the way, not coincidentally, and almost the same, well, not exactly the same time because there's a time difference, but almost at the same time, doing the same shit on Oxford Street in London.
Yeah.
I mean, when is it that we? By the way, I'm going to go into the adult theme. So for those that are watching us in YouTube, thank you very much. Click on the goddamn link and come over to Odyssey, because now is when we get serious. But not in YouTube. Bye-bye.